Romans 1:18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, because that which is known about God is evident within them, for God made it evident to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power, and divine nature has been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. For even though they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks, but they became futile in their speculations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory of the incorruptible God for an image in the form of the incorruptible man, and of birds, and four-footed animals, and crawling creatures. Okay, we'll stop there. As you were reading, I'm sure there were word differences between my translation and yours. So,
which one are you using?
New American Standard, 1995. The real God-written book. It has red.
I got the King James. That's the original. You know that. There's the New King James. Even better.
Mine's in Hebrew.
Just like here's the Hebrew. I don't know how to recover from that. It's like the mic drop. It's like a mic drop. But yeah, it's good. All right. So we talked last week about the wrath of God, and before that we talked about the righteousness of God, which was up in 17. And we talk about this wrath and what that meant, and it was revealed against all ungodliness and unrighteousness. And then we start talking about who suppressed the truth in unrighteousness because, and he states a reason for why they do it. Okay, pretty audacious to say, I know the reason why you guys act the way you do. I'm not sure it's really that. I think it's more, well, let's get into it. Let's do it that way. Because that which is known about God is evident within them. Is that how everyone else is worded that way?
Bond says that which may be known of God is manifest in them.
Okay, so evident, manifest, all means to be shown or exposed, to be obvious, right? So why is that obvious? Let me do the counterpoint. Seriously? Obvious? Seriously?
Yeah, the general revelation part is creation. I mean, if you look around, the all of creation is obvious, that part.
So why is that obvious? And we cannot use the word common sense in talking about this. What makes it so obvious? What helps us? Why is that true statement? I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, I guess things that man can't make, so to speak.
Yet, if I again, I'm trying to be the contrarian here to push our thinking beyond just what these words have. Why is it obvious?
My footnote uses the wind as an example. We can't see it, but we know that it's there. You know, we can feel it. We know the effects of it, but we can't physically see it.
Creation demands a creator. Design demands a designer. And we are made by God. He created us and has put a little something in us, I guess.
Okay. So while I agree with you,
still
prove it. Right? How do you say yes? It is evident that God did this, because that's what isn't that what Paul is trying to say? Mm-hmm. Is that it is known about God is evident within them about God, meaning like we were trying to refer to the creation and all this other stuff. But how do you
think the
prove
life
that?
God gave them is that how they respond to that amount of life that He's given them? That someone's done this. They might not know it's God, but they know this just didn't happen. There has to be someone out there, you know.
Right.
I mean, if you look at 19, and it says that because that which is known about God is evident within them.
Within.
In other words, it's like God is placed within mankind this understanding, this innate understanding that there is something greater.
There's something else.
Something else.
Other than the rocks and trees that I touch and feel,
right.
There's something more than that.
This had to come from someone,
right.
not just.
Kind of building on what you're saying is God put something in you.
Right.
Call it curiosity, for lack of a better phrase. You know, generally, I mean, there's always exceptions.
kids are curious. They want to go touch. They want to go feel. They want to go. That's how they learn. And God put that desire. Even the whole idea of reproduction. God put the desire in the man type thing. It's that type of things. The way I understand that manifest in them is, and you put it exactly right. God put something in you to make you want to look.
Well, yeah, I think make you want to look, but I think also, to me, it says that, maybe we're not born with a blank slate. Maybe we're born with something on that slate that God has put there, and that whatever that is put there is only erased because of experiences and decisions and things like that. But that at our creation, because God is the creator, that there is something that is put on our slate that makes it evident to us that there is a God, that there is something greater than us. That
What distinguishes us humans between an animal?
exactly.
One of the things is curiosity.
Yeah.
I mean, we want to see patterns. We want to understand what things are. And so we desire to understand. I mean, it's a desire. I know my dogs, they don't care. Oh, new space alien. Hey, how's it going? All they care about is if they get fed by the
Yeah,
alien.
but hang on a second. To be the contrarian,
Yeah.
When a puppy, he's into everything. He's curious.
Up to
He's
a point,
searching.
Right.
He's learning.
Right.
So I'm not.
No, I
I'm not
understand.
disagreeing with you because there is something different.
Yeah.
But
to a point.
To a point.
Like,
To a
they'll go
point.
investigate a tennis shoe.
Yeah.
Reason.
Maybe I'll chew it, maybe I won't,
Reason,
but
yeah.
we're like, where did that come from? How did they do that?
Right.
Yeah.
We want to get into the nitty gritty details.
Right.
and we want to make it new and better.
Yeah, could we make it
Whatever
better?
else, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And evolution has it like, we started from nothing, then we start getting better as time goes on, and then all of a sudden, a relationship with a God or something like that.
Yeah.
But when we look at Adam, he started off with a relationship with God. It doesn't-
Exactly.
We started off knowing God, and then through time, got away from him.
I certainly can't imagine that Adam was going to challenge God on who made the garden.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just evident
Yeah.
that it wasn't him.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was there.
Yeah.
And it's like man continually searches for ways to take that away from God.
Yeah.
To make it, to give us that power to say that we had something to do with this, not God.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then he continues on in 20 with I think, example of, I guess is the way I would call that. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature. Let's talk about those three things there. I see it start off with, for since the creation of the world. In other words, from the beginning, from everything we know that started things. There's these invisible attributes. That's at least what the way mine's worded. What is that?
Yeah, it goes on to talk to say things that have been made, so that's, I think, what it's talking about.
That's
Some
what God
kind of a
says.
Divine creator. The latter part of that verse says things that have been made. So I think it's talking about creation.
Okay.
All of
Right.
creation.
Okay. So,
My version says, for his invisible attributes, that is his eternal power and divine nature.
so
So it makes it
Makes
sound
it
like
clearer,
his
clarify.
eternal power and divine nature are his invisible attributes.
I see. Okay. And so far, once again, he states that it has been clearly seen here, being understood that what has been made. So what is this made stuff? We're talking just
Creation.
creation.
Anything, everything.
So
I think if we take a step back and try to understand that when the people at this time, whatever it was, AD, whatever, there was no talk of evolution. There was a God or some God or something greater than them that created everything. right? There was no, that man just evolved from a single cell, whatever.
Right.
Right, so they understood that there was something greater. And so this whole idea of looking at the world and saying something created this was not foreign to them, right? It was something that they would clearly understand. Now, whether it was Yahweh or whether it was the sun god or whether it was whoever, right? That was the choice they had to make. But there was no denying the fact that there was something that made all of this. So,
Certainly wasn't any kind of talk, I think, about, it was just an accident.
yes,
Things just,
just happened.
I wonder when that came about, because that's a good point. I never thought of that, but all of a sudden, somebody came up with this Big Bang thing that
Well,
it's
I mean,
all just a coincidence kind of thing.
People got too smart.
well, that's
Yeah,
exactly
we're
what
trying to be
right.
smarter than
Yeah.
God. There has to be another explanation.
I would well imagine that the driving force to get to that was to be able to deny the existence of God.
Exactly.
It's a
Yeah.
struggle to deny.
I think that's the key, and I don't know if you meant this when you said it, but, and it kind of a combination of what y'all were saying, we're so smart for ourselves, they're trying to disprove God.
Right.
So if it's not God, it's either a Big Bang or evolution.
Well, it's
And
what-
I remember growing up, those were the only two choices. I
Right.
mean, I grew up in a church, so I had that, but
Right.
looking at the secular world, that was the only thing they taught in school, either
Right.
or.
Yeah.
There's no in between. It's like, wait a minute, I don't believe either one of them.
Well, think about what did the enemy do in the garden? What did Satan do in the garden? That's what he tried to basically tell Eve that what God is telling you is not true.
Yeah.
He's holding out on you. He's not giving you all the information, right?
It's just like anything else. It's a little bit of truth, and then they
Yeah.
pervert it and go off on a tangent.
Right. And I mean, that's what man has always tried to bring God down. That was the whole idea of the Tower of Babel and everything else, that,
Yeah.
God is not as high and mighty as everyone thinks he is. We can reach him.
Right.
So it's always that pride of man. That's what it is. Pride comes down to pride.
You see that common throughout history, but do you really think these scientists that formulate these hypotheses about the Big Bang, that they're truly driven by the desire to prove that God does not exist?
To me, yeah.
I
I think
there was notoriety.
yeah, I think right. Yeah, I think it's a lot of times it could be the notoriety, or it just could be their makeup or their mindset as far as what they believe, that they don't believe in God, so they're gonna disprove it.
I haven't seen any evidence to the contrary of that, but I
Right.
haven't really seen many outspoken scientists that say God does not exist. Well, I have seen some, but I guess.
I've read about it, yeah.
Yeah.
Or I mean, you even go to what was you and Patty watched the movie about the newspaper guy, the famous newspaper guy that
Hearst?
sought out to prove that God was.
Doesn't exist.
Oh, the Chicago Tribune he worked for or something.
Yeah, remember? I think did you see that movie?
That was like, was it J. Warner Wallace?
No, this guy's still alive. I mean, he was at First Baptist.
I read about the guy,
study
his
that.
wife had become a Christian.
Yes.
So he started going to see what she was doing, and so he bought a ledger, and he listened to the sermon and put for and against. And he-
Yeah.
Yeah.
After a while, there was so much for, then he became a Christian.
Lee Strobel.
Yeah.
Lee Strobel. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But just like
Case,
that, he
case
sought
against
out.
Christ.
Yes.
Case for Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He sought out to prove. I mean,
To
he was
disprove.
going to prove that there was no God.
He's gonna prove
That's
it.
what Tolkien, is it Tolkien or the other one?
And Lindsay, same thing with
Say
Cal.
J.R.R. Tolkien?
Okay.
Or the other one, who was his,
Lewis.
C.S.
C.S. Lewis.
Yeah.
one of the two, it was the same thing. He went out to prove him wrong, and then ended up being,
It seems like if someone's sincere and they're really searching, and they set out to do it, that God reveals himself.
Yeah. I don't want to sidetrack it, but if you listen to Rick Warren's podcast from yesterday, it talks about, he debates like 3 well-known atheists and their feeling of believing in a God. Basically, they don't believe in our God, but because they have more, he said you're still working from faith, because you have faith in the evolution and we have faith in a God, which your faith has to be a lot stronger to believe in evolution than our faith has to be in God. But he goes on to explain why. And it's basically because man doesn't want to be bossed around.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and that's, if we can disprove there's a God, then we don't have to have a boss. We want to be our own boss
Right.
or our own God, basically.
Right. It's just pride.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Again,
Well, I've known a couple of people that are striving to invent something, if you will. My brother-in-law is one of them. He's working on a cancer treatment. It's another story. But reading some stuff on Einstein and all these guys, they have this hypothesis. And the top 2 or 3 in the world of whatever that hypothesis is a huge competition. They're constantly looking at what I'm gonna do this because they want their name to be on the top of whatever their field is.
Right.
And Einstein's a good example of that. If you ever read much about him, and everything else is so they're coming up with anything they can to get the notoriety. That's why I mentioned notoriety,
Right.
not because they're looking for truth.
Right.
They have gotten so into the competitive side, they want their name on top of that monument.
Right. Which is once again what we're talking about. Go back to pride.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it is. And so they no longer care about the truth. They're just trying to get over their 2, not only buddies, but their 2 competitors.
Think about this when we read about the fall of Satan. What was the reason Satan fell? It's pride. Right? He got, the way Scripture tells about it, is he looked at himself and he became, prideful in what he was doing and chose to honor himself rather than God. And that was the reason for the fall. So I think that's pride is behind, to me, pride is behind all sin. Anything that we do.
As they say, the eye is in the middle of sin, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's right.
It is.
Pride.
And so is pride. Very good. Very good. That's good, Steve. And that's it, man. We're done. That's great. All right. Could you guys help clarify for me, though, what is eternal power and what is divine nature? Those are nice, good Bible words. We need to use those every so often, but what is the eternal power? Power for what? To do what? What is
Anything, everything.
There's no power higher than him. Life is in him. He created life.
Yeah,
He's all knowing of the attributes. He's all knowing. He's all powerful. Those would all be.
But they're talking about things that have been clearly perceived.
Right.
Well, in creation, to create
The
the
universe.
moon and the stars,
Yeah, right.
and the fact that he's a good God, the rain that he provides, and the soil and the food that we eat, and all of that, all because of him.
I think eternal meaning forever, like
Yeah.
anything that we create doesn't last forever. Cars, everything we create wears out eventually, even our bodies wear out. So,
Okay.
it's interesting, because Hebrews, we just started studying Hebrews, starts out with, when it starts comparing the preeminence of Jesus, one of the first things it starts talking about is his eternal power, right? And also his divine nature, because it was through Christ that all things were created, right? He is the very Word of God, the essence of God. And also his sacrifice was the perfect sacrifice. It is the sacrifice that lasts for all time. So it makes God eternal. And remember who the audience was for this book. These are not Gentiles for the most part, right?
Divine nature?
Say, how do you define something without using the word? Divine means it's of God, in my opinion. It's
Maybe we could wash it down to the good, the righteous,
The righteous,
the holy.
okay.
holy.
You see what I'm saying?
But righteous only in the
Right.
in the definition we had last week,
Right.
where it's of God.
Of all things God does, He does it for our good. Is a way to look at that. It is
It's the way that he operates.
right, as opposed to humans, which is not divine in any way, but rather corrupt and is self-serving.
Yes.
Right?
but it's holistic. And what I mean by that is, my mind, takes off in tangents, but when you said for our own good, it's not necessarily for Howard Kearney's own good. It's for mankind's own good.
No, he was talking about he was talking about man not acting in a divine way.
Right.
We act in a self-serving way.
True. No,
Yeah.
I agree with
Yeah.
that.
So
Using
it-
the opposite to define
Right.
that, right?
Yeah, but, okay. I thought you were talking about trying to say God
No.
does things for for your own good.
Well, I do think there is scripture to base that on. Whether I like it or not, it is
Right.
for my good,
Right.
that kind of a thing.
So there's collateral damage. I think he's at.
But I guess what I'm saying is God does not mean it evil to me,
Right.
Correct.
right? That's what I'm trying to drive at. That everything he does is for a pure and holy reason,
Yes.
not for some subversive,
Revenge or whatever.
right.
Even
exactly.
in his vengeance.
Right. There's a
There's a
divineness to it,
righteousness,
right?
yeah.
Righteousness to it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's and that is his very nature.
Yeah.
He sends the rain on the just and the unjust.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Good. He's a
Yeah.
good God.
And there's a reason for that. Yeah. And, okay. So that's what that is. And all of those things have been clearly, without question, understood through what has been made. So that's that creation we talked about. So Paul's conclusion is, so they're without excuse. Bam. Good lawyer. You just go ahead and set out the charge and you say, you are without excuse. Then he goes on with another here's another example of that. For even though they knew God, they did not honor him as God. Okay, all right, so. What? For even though they knew God, in my mind's thinking, if they know God, then that should settle it right there.
Yeah.
Right?
I wanted to say something important because I posted on this back and forth, and it just coincidentally, Brother Ronnie said this Wednesday night, kind of in passing while he was talking about Baptist beliefs, but he touched on something that I also had read some years ago in a book by Pastor Robert Jeffress, and so it was on the question of what about people that have never heard the gospel?
Right.
Okay, so how do you sort that out? And so the answer is, there isn't a huge amount of things said specifically to that answer, but there is enough said. So here was what Brother Ronnie said, which matched what that other book said, is, and it also ties into what Frank said a while ago about responding to the amount of light that you have. So general revelation, creation, a person, even somebody remote that responds to general revelation, recognizing there is some kind of creator, there's some kind of God, there's some kind of divine creator. If you truly respond in that way, then you will be provided somehow, some way, enough additional specific revelation about our Messiah, our Christ, Jesus, to then have the gospel and accept it or reject it. And the two poster children of the New Testament would be Philip coming along when the Ethiopian was reading the Bible, and he had a true concern and an interest, but he didn't really have the whole understanding. And Philip came along just at the right time. The other poster child being Cornelius, who was a man who recognized and was devoted and devout, but he really didn't know the gospel. And then it was provided to him when he sent his man over to get Peter.
And I was going to bring that up, but I was going to wait. But growing up, that was always the verse that talked about what if the missionaries can't get to these remote tribes in New Zealand, and that's the little phrase he had. You want to get missionaries to go out and spread the word, but what about those who've never heard? And this was always the one that they still don't have an excuse, but they may not know Jesus by his name, Jesus, or even the fact that but you're right, they have this understanding that there's a creator.
Yeah.
And you go to some of these tribes, say tribes, but whatever you wanna call them, that have never heard, out in the jungles of the Amazon or whatever, they knew of something, they called it something different.
Yeah.
But
If you go back to their ancestors, the earlier parts of those tribes, they did believe in something like you
Yeah,
said.
absolutely.
Yeah,
And with the years, they've got away from it.
I tell you, an exciting book to read that was written probably 30 years ago, was called The Peace Child, by a missionary that had gone into a totally backwoods place in the jungles of, no. It was, somewhere in Indonesia, like in Irian Jaya or somewhere. And so anyway, the punchline of the book, this was actually a famous book, many homeschooler kids have read this and all, is by Don Richardson. It was that these tribes that he encountered in the back of nowhere that had never seen a white man, they already had this analogy, he called it a redemptive analogy, but that analogy was similar to and pointing the way toward the real peace child, Jesus. And so that was his foot in the door. Now this didn't happen in a day, but that's why he came up with that term redemptive analogy. Was they already had some clue,
Yeah.
but they didn't have all the dots connected.
So Steve, what you're saying is that if you're searching, because of general, God will provide a way.
If you respond at the general revelation level, then you're gonna be given enough light at the specific revelation, what you're holding in your hand, that, that you will have enough there to respond to know what you need to respond to. If you're spiritually there.
You connect the dots between the general and Christ.
Yeah.
So does that's verse 20 is what you're saying, right? The invisible things is going to be enough for you if you respond to that first.
But this does not give ammunition for those who reject Christ. In other words, you can't, I just don't know if atheist is the right word, but someone who doesn't believe in Christ can't point back to this and say, I'm still going to heaven, I'm okay because I recognize the attributes, because you're consciously denying Christ.
Right.
You see what I mean?
Yes.
The people that Steve was just talking about didn't deny anything, they just didn't have the full knowledge.
If you read the next verse, you'll see,
Right.
as a result,
Right.
or they knew God, but they did not glorify Him as God.
Right,
So
right.
they didn't give God the credit for what they're seeing.
So they rejected a part of it.
Right.
Yes.
So there, and again, that's where I think the evolution, there's gotta be, I don't wanna give God the credit, so there's gotta be another way. So
Yeah.
we're gonna research and
That's
we're
rejected.
gonna find another
We'll find another one.
Another-
Anything but God.
option, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I looked it up, it was between 1748 and 18-something, there were
Yeah.
70, things put out about evolution, is when that whole
Late
thing.
1700s?
Yeah,
So, I mean,
1748.
With
you
Darwin.
know, how long in history we're talking about, man?
Yeah.
This,
300
Right.
years.
within the last 300 years of this.
Right, they
That
just
was the whole
started,
idea.
they just started publicizing things about evolution.
Yeah.
To me, what this is saying is, like, even those people you're talking about that have had no access to anything, like all of us, I think, were given as human beings, some people call it a moral compass, but they all have the same values. All of those people know it's not right to kill your neighbor or steal your friend's wife or all of those things. And in addition to that, I think we all have a moral compass that tells us there's something greater than us. But for those people that deny that and turn away from Him, that's where they're getting in trouble. But we're all given the basics of what we need, and then it's up to us to, follow.
So,
Or not.
Even my mom, when she was saved at that Billy Graham crusade, and then after it was over with, we went back to what church we were going to. We didn't know anything else. And right soon after that, God led someone to my mom to where invited to the church, and all of a sudden we were being fed the truth. It could have gone for years, maybe, without that, but because of that decision, all of a sudden God,
Yes.
okay,
God
send somebody
intervenes.
yeah, so it's still doing that, you know.
His mom and my mom was saved at that exact same rally.
Really?
What is 1952, my mom said, or 54?
It's somewhere in the fifties.
Yeah, my mom was like 17. Yeah, the old baseball stadium. Yeah, it's amazing.
Two different families
And
affected.
y'all, they didn't go together, it wasn't like.
No,
They didn't know each other.
no, my mom was
They didn't
young.
know
My
each
mom
other.
was, because my mom's only 88 right now. She was young. She was like 16 at that
Yeah,
same
my
rally.
mom.
Wow,
It's
that's
amazing,
That's
yep.
a great story.
Fantastic.
Okay, so we need to stop, but I want to remind us as we're looking at this, that Paul's accusation is stated to the who he's accusing is those who suppress the truth.
Yes.
We're not talking the innocents here. We're talking his accusations in 18 is who suppress the truth, and we want to remember that means I'm going to do everything I can to not let you know about Christ or God. I'm going to suppress that truth. Not suppress it to itself, okay? I'm just going to deny. It's not that. It's who is suppressing the truth. So that is the accusation that's going on here. So we're going to pick that back up.
Where are we leaving off?
So we're going to, 21, I'd like to pick it back up on for even though they knew God.
You're gonna be out in a couple of weeks, aren't you, Steve?
I'm leaving Tuesday, so that's one of the things we pray for. I'm going on that Japan mission trip.
So what are you guys praying for?